Well, no matter where one sits on the spectrum, there must always be the ambition to do better. And as David Hill said, increased audiences increase your bargaining power. There must also be a greater sense of urgency about the need to be better, with Alan Carpenter's example about answering the phones, as relevant today as it was 30 years ago, although the phone's more likely to be a mobile. And the ABC would be wise to revisit the area where it conducted programs which encouraged local talent. It must get out of the mindset that nothing happens here, which seems to be the attitude in the East, nothing happens here, and allocate more resources to states such as WA. I had a look at the staff distribution of the ABC around the country. New South Wales 49.5%, followed by Victoria 17.7%, Queensland 11.6%, South Australia 6.7%, WA 5.1%. 1/3 of the landmass, 5.1% of the staff. And when I started at Adelaide Terrace, I checked this with one of the veteran staff. How many people were employed at Adelaide Terrace? He said he thought more than 600. And I said, how many would be employed at East Perth now? He said, well, it's about 70 full-time in the building in East Perth. Now, that doesn't mean that things have to stay the same. They don't. Things never stay the same. But to see the staff denuded and run down to that extent from the days there in Adelaide Terrace, where TV production was local, a lot of it was local. They had all sorts of people employed, in addition to the journalists and presenters and technicians and so on, the producers. There was the TV section, there were carpenters, they made sets for education programs, all those sorts of things. It was a very comprehensive operation. Now, as I said, don't expect things to stay the same, but it has really been run down very considerably. David Hill strengthened the presence in the major country towns. That's one of the things he did do very strongly. And the point about regional representation, he knew that there was strong support in the country, and he knew that country listeners, country supporters had to be provided with good services. You go to a major country centre, you'll find the ABC studios there, usually in a prominent position and prominently signed in those country centres where they are located. And I think that started with David Hill. As I said, there must also be a greater sense of urgency, and Alan Carpenter's example about the phones as relevant now as they were 30 years ago. I know there's a great emphasis on digital production emanating from Sydney, and that probably is the way of the future. But in racing to the digital, and you can't stand in the way of progress. I think this is one thing I learned in the newspapers industry, for instance. When newspaper production was becoming computerised, there was a lot of opposition to it. And certainly in Britain, there's a total opposition to it in Britain, but a lot of opposition to it, but you can't stop it. But the important thing is that it be introduced in a way where there's benefit across the board. So it's got to be phased in with benefits across the board. That's why this digital phasing in has to be done carefully.